What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2011 Volvo XC60 P3. Today I have the XC60 behind me. We're going to be covering how to install not one, not two, but three upgrade kits from our friends over at DO88, all of which are available on fcpo.com. Starting with, obviously, the most important one here, the Performance Intercooler. This has a 69% larger core volume than the stock factory unit. This one's going to be a bit on the shorter side, but this one, again, is larger than the factory one, and this one is for vehicles with the adaptive cruise. To complement this intercooler, we have two more kits. One is the intercooler piping kit, which is just going to allow for better airflow to actually give this intercooler a chance to do its job. And we have the Inlet pipe kit, which is going to allow up to a 14% better flow for the whole system. Otherwise, you do just the intercooler on its own, you're not really going to gain the benefit from it. So we're doing all three today just to complement each other. We'll show you how to install them. We're going to be removing some bumpers, some headlights, even a little bit of firewall. Again, this is going to be applicable to all your T6 P3 vehicles. It's going to be a bit tighter on the XC60, believe it or not. Let me know in the comments if you do this on an S60 or V60, how that goes for you. I'm more concerned about the little we have between the engine and the firewall, which is going to be coming out. But before we get started on that, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. All right, for this job, my good people, we have our regular socket set, which is needed. Some of the more specialty sockets are going to be Torx. We have a T40, a T30, and a T25. We have both short and long versions of those. We have a half-inch drive torque wrench for our lug bolts. We're going to be taking off the driver's side wheel more than likely. 3/8 drive and 1/4-inch drive ratchets, both with a fixed head and a flex head, come in really handy, as well as extensions for both of those. We have a couple of different set of pliers, as well as some snips for zip ties. Same thing, swivel extensions for the 3/8 drive in case we need it. 10mm wrench, flathead screwdriver, or this flexible CTA. This is a 7mm driver screwdriver. Comes in really handy for a lot of the clamps that we're going to be dealing with today. Speaking of clamps, we have a small pick tool, which is going to help us break some of those. Small Phillips head screwdriver, a little bit of a bigger flathead screwdriver. We have a bunch of plastic rivets to remove, so I have this plastic rivet removal pliers set, which we may use today. We have some electric tools, an electric ratchet, and an electric impact gun to make quick work of some of the hardware. And with that, we'll probably need a vacuum for some of the stuff behind the intercooler that we're going to be removing. This car has over 200,000 miles, so I'm sure there'll be some debris in that AC condenser and radiator. But with that, my good people, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, to get started on this, the main goal is to get access to where we're going to be working up top. We're going to remove the beauty cover. We're going to have to get the cowl out of the way as well. So the easiest and first thing for us today is going to be to get the beauty cover off first. That'll give us room to some of the inlet piping from this DO88 kit that we're going to be upgrading. So we'll go ahead and pull that off. All right, at this point, we're going to work on also removing our bumper cover just so we have access to the front part of the intercooler upgrade. We have two T25s on the top, on the inside of the headlights to remove. That holds on the top portion of our bumper cover. Then from there, we have a couple plastic rivets that we're going to push in on and lift up. That's going to free them up, and we can go ahead and set them to the side. They're just expanding rivets. A small flathead screwdriver or a small pick will help you get them out of the way. Following that, we're going to go ahead and get these headlights out of the way. The one really nice thing about these P3 chassis cars and some of the P2s is the way the headlights are held in. Two little plastic swords, pull them up. Then you can work the headlight out gently, get to the electrical connector in the back. Sometimes a small flathead or pick will help you get them disconnected. These have been plugged in for over 200,000 miles, so they can be a little bit hard to get out. But once you free them up, you can go ahead and set the headlights over on the side. Following that, we're going to head over to the wheel well where we have a few more T25s, 5 on each side to remove. We're just going to use a 1/4-inch on the ratchet to zap them out. You may have to remove the wheel to give yourself a little bit more room. Once you have the T25 hardware removed, you can see there's two small plastic tabs that help kind of key the bumper into place. Just go ahead and pull forward on that and you'll free up the bumper. You're going to have one on either side of the bumper. On the underside of the car, we have a couple plastic expanding rivets that kind of hold the bottom portion of the bumper to one of the lower radiator supports. We're just going to use a small flathead and plier set, like needle nose, to pinch those shut and pull those plastics out. Sometimes over time they can get a little bit brittle, so just be mindful if they break. We do have them available, of course. Once those are removed, we can start working the bumper off. There's a couple clips underneath where the headlights sit that hold it up against the support on the front end of the car. They just pop out. You can use a small flathead screwdriver or a small pick to kind of give them a little bit of help coming out, especially if they haven't been off ever before. As we start working the bumper off, we're going to want to make sure that there's no electrical connectors left, or headlight washers, or washer hose assemblies, depending on how your vehicle is equipped. So just make sure to take a quick look. Any connectors that you do have left, go ahead and remove them. Now's a great time to also get a second set of hands to kind of help you get the bumper off if you do have a couple connections to remove. Now we can move to the underside of the car where we have 8 T30s to remove. This holds in the splash shield, and that's just going to give us more room to some of the intercooler upgrade piping. Once you have those all removed, we can go ahead and take that shield off and just set it to the side. All right, now that we have the under shield removed, we're just going to head back up top to continue gaining access to the inlet kit. We have two 15mm nuts that hold in our windshield wiper blades. We're going to go ahead and pull those off now. All right, now that we have both of our windshield wipers removed, this is going to give us a little bit more room to remove the rest of the cowling. We have a battery cover to remove, a couple tabs hold that in place. It's kind of a two-part thing. Once we get that off, we can go ahead and move on to some of the clips around the actual battery tray itself. On either end of the cowl, we have some expanding rivets that we're going to want to remove. You can use a combo of a flathead screwdriver or a rivet removal tool like the one that we're using here. Once you get them removed, there's a couple on either end and some in the middle right above the inlet piping. We can go ahead and start working this cowl piece off. You do have two little trim pieces by the windshield that kind of just pop into the cowl. You're going to want to pop those out as well just to make it easier to remove it. So at this point, we can remove the cowl entirely and go ahead and set it to the side. We have four 10mm plastic nuts that help hold in this firewall section that we're going to be removing. So we're just going to use a combination of 10mm ratcheting wrenches and extensions to get these off. It's a little bit of a tight workspace, but you can get to them. Once we have those removed, we can go ahead and work on removing the bracket that holds in our ECU. It's a little bit tight of a reach. Once you drop the nuts in there like we did, you do remove the bracket. You do have access to pick them up later on. When we go to reinstall this later, you actually have the ability to separate the ECU from the bracket once it's out, which will make it a lot more easier to install the bracket later on. Once we have that bracket and ECU out of the way, we can lift up the vacuum line coming off of your brake booster that goes through the firewall, just a rubber grommet, pop that out of the way. That's going to give us better access to the hardware that holds the firewall metal in place. It's held in by 5 8mm bolts. These are going to be a little bit tricky to get to. We're going to be using a combination of different extensions. You might want to switch to a 1/4 inch drive if you can. It's just a little bit thinner. Magnet tool is going to be super handy, and we're going to basically work our way around it and get the rest of them off. But once you get all 5 removed, you can go ahead and lift it up. Just note that the insulation does stay put. It does not come up as it is part of a larger piece. Now with that, we can start working the inlet piping off. You can use a 7mm driver, a flex head screwdriver like the one we're using here, or just a trusty flathead screwdriver. We're going to be breaking off the clamp with a small flathead as we have a new replacement with our inlet kit. And then down by the turbo, we have another hose clamp to remove. That's going to be allowing us to get this top inlet pipe off. Just be mindful of the vacuum line that is attached to that. We're going to go ahead and disconnect that. We're going to disconnect it at the solenoid. We have a new replacement with that as well. That comes with the kit, a nice new silicone upgrade. Sometimes some small pliers will help you work them off, especially if they've been on there for a very long time. At this point, we have what you can call the macaroni piece, or macaroni elbow left, that goes to the turbo. These are held in with a clamp at the bottom right at the turbo. But in our case, once we undid the top clamp at the top of the inlet pipe and elbow meeting the bottom part of the elbow at the turbo, we just literally forced off. And you can see us pulling that out right here. All right, up top, we have two 13mm that we're going to be removing. This is going to allow us to get some of these old grommet locators for the old beauty cover out of the way. We also have 4 10mm that we're going to be removing to get rid of the brackets that are no longer needed that hold some of these grommet locators as well. So we're going to go ahead and zap those out now using a shallow 10mm socket. Then we have 2 T40s up top. Those are going to help undo one of the knock sensors and one of the grommets that used to hold the beauty cover in place. With those torques out of the way, and we have another 8mm to remove for this knock sensor. All right, now we have that out of the way, we can start feeding in our new silicone elbow that's going to be going to the turbo. We have our clamp preloaded on the elbow for the bottom portion. We can work the top one on after the fact, but that way we don't have to worry about feeding it in. We have that. We're going to go ahead and move these vacuum lines out of the way, feed the elbow in, making sure that we don't pinch the lines up against anything weird or anything like that. With our elbow on, we're just going to go ahead and mock fit the inlet pipe going from the turbo to the airbox. It's going to be a very tight fit. You do have to kind of mount the hard pipe first using 2 13mm bolts in the provided hardware. And then we're going to go ahead and feed the actual elbow coming off of the turbo on with our clamp. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but they are designed to be able to be bent a little bit and kind of compressed if you're having a hard time feeding it onto the aluminum elbow. From there, we can install the rubber silicone elbow that goes from the hard line or hard pipe to the airbox. Again, 7mm driver or flathead screwdriver, tighten down both of those clamps, and we should be good to rock and roll. From there, we're going to move to the front of the car, get the crash bar out of the way. There's some plastic shrouding that goes around the stock intercooler. We can go ahead and just pop those out. We're not going to be needing those. Once we have those out, we have 2 15mm bolts to remove the actual crash bar. Now, because this car is equipped with the active cruise control, we're going to be using a different bar, which is linked in the description below. So we can go ahead and get that out of the way. With that crash bar out of the way, we're going to want to use a ratchet strap to support our radiator up while we remove the radiator support, or prep ourselves to remove the radiator support. So for that, we have 4 10mm bolts. We can go ahead and drop that. So now that we have our ratchet straps set up, we're going to go ahead and work on getting the lower radiator brace out of the way. It's held on by 2 8mm bolts, one on either end. Go ahead and zap those out. With that, we're going to work on removing the intercooler piping going to the actual intercooler. Again, 7mm driver or flathead screwdriver helps you get these clamps off. They are very tight to reach, so in this case, the flexible CTA screwdrivers are the move. Following by that, we have a couple 8mm bolts that hold the actual intercooler piping to the bottom of the engine block. We're going to go ahead and zap those out using the electric ratchet. That way we have a little bit more play in the piping, and it makes it a little bit more easier to get these rubber elbows off of the intercooler. Since you're not going to be reusing the plastic tubes here, be mindful when you're removing them, especially if you want them for a rainy day, but you can go ahead and kind of just yank those out. In our case, the clamps to the intercooler themselves were not accessible by a flathead or the CTA drivers. So what I ended up doing, which is cutting the clamps off, as you see here, and pulling the hose off. All right, once you have both of the elbows going to the intercooler undone, you can start pulling the intercooler out gently. Some vehicles are equipped with a pressure sensor on either side of the intercooler, sometimes both. As you'll note on the new DO88 intercooler, there's 2 spots. You can run block-off plates, or you have a spot for this switch. We're going to take the sensor off of our old intercooler and swap it over to our DO88 unit. There is a block-off plate for the other side if your car has no sensor. We also have a new bolt that comes with the DO88 that will go into the aluminum versus the coarse threaded bolt that we used on the factory intercooler. Block-off plate will go on the other side. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and trim up the surrounds of the old intercooler. We have a lot of plastic here that we're not going to be needing anymore. So just be mindful when you are doing this upgrade, you are doing some permanent modifications. Nothing that you can't replace in the future should you ever need to revert back to stock. A second set of hands is super helpful when installing something like this. So if you have a second pair of hands, grab them, have them help you get the intercooler in. Then we're going to feed in the 2 8mm bolts that hold the intercooler to our AC condenser / radiator combo. Okay, now that we have the intercooler bolted up, it's not going to move around on us. We can start working in the elbows for the intercooler. That's going to lead to our new intercooler piping. So feed the elbow in first. We're on the passenger side here. And we're going to feed in our hard line and get the 8mm bolts that hold it up against the oil pan in place. We can leave everything loose until we have everything situated at the very end. Same thing with the clamps. Everything is going to be loose until they're all situated. Again, 2 8mm bolts to get that pipe secured to the bottom of the block. Then we can continue on feeding the last silicone bit coming to our hard line from the inlet on the turbo. 2 clamps, flathead screwdriver, or the CTA flexible bit driver in this case is super helpful for these harder to reach spots. Once we have that situated and that's all good to go, coming from the turbo to the passenger side of the intercooler, we can crank down on the clamps and get those squared away. Coming off of the throttle body, same thing, we have the old plastic pipe to remove. Make sure you get to the clamps before you pull these out. Pull that 8mm bolt that holds that in place. Sometimes it's a 10 or a T30, depending on how your car's been equipped or work on. Get the old elbow out. Give the throttle body a wipe down if you haven't already. And then feed in the elbow going to the throttle body. But leave it loose, as you may have to clock it depending on the orientation of your elbow when you put it in. So clamps are preloaded, elbow still loose, so we can mess with it as we feed in the metal charge pipe. Whenever installing any of these kits, you want to make sure that you have the beveled edge on the inside of the clamp so that they don't blow off under any hard acceleration. That goes for intercooler piping or charge pipe, whatever you're working on. They should all have a hard edge that should feed in on the interior of the clamp. Just like we did on the passenger side, on the turbo feed side, we're leaving everything nice and loose until we have everything situated, and then we can go in and snug in all of our clamps. The fit for this is actually pretty good. We didn't really have to do any modifications. With that buttoned up, now we can work on getting everything reassembled. So at this point, if you're comfortable, you can remove the ratchet, although you do have a little bit of room between the new intercooler and the AC radiator combo. You can move your ratchet strap that's holding everything together. In this case, we replaced the radiator support bar as the old one was very crusty. Again, it's held in by 4 10mm bolts. And if you can see in the corner, we have a screw jack supporting the intercooler, which is also bolted onto our AC compressor and radiator sandwich. So that's acting as our quote-unquote ratchet strap while we put in the bar. So if you're working on this at home on the driveway or in the garage, use a small floor jack with a small piece of wood. You can brace the whole cooling sandwich, we're going to call it, with that. Get rid of your ratchet strap and feed your radiator support bar back in. At this point, my good people, we can get our 8 T30s and snug that shield back up. We're just going to use the electric ratchet with an extended T30 to speed things up a little bit. You don't want to over tighten these as they go into plastic grommets, but just keep that in mind. Before we continue on, don't forget to tighten down the clamps at the actual throttle body if you haven't done so already. Again, 7mm socket. It's time to start putting the rest of the car back together. So we're going to work on the firewall portion. We're going to get that fed in using a combination of 1/4-inch ratchets and some extensions. We have 3 on the driver's side and 2 on the passenger side. Once we have those in place, we can sit the insulation back in place, grab our 4 10mm plastic nuts, and get that situated against the firewall piece as well. If you haven't done so already, be sure to reroute your vacuum line coming off of your brake booster and your ECU harness back into place. At this point, we pop the ECU off of the bracket itself, grab our 2 10mm nuts, tighten those down up against the firewall. Once that bracket is secured, you can go ahead and slide your ECU back in, and it will just clip right into place. So at this point, we can start working our cowl back in place. So we're going to go ahead and kind of line everything up, make sure it's keying into the corners of the windshield properly, and we can go ahead and grab our expanding rivets and clip those back into place. Don't forget the little winglets that go on the corners of the windshield as well. Those have delicate tabs, so just be mindful when you're removing and installing these. At the same time, we can go ahead and resecure the covers on top of our battery box, as well as the weather stripping that goes across the cowl to seal the cowl and the hood. If you had the marks on your windshield, now it's a great time to reinstall your windshield wipers. Feed them onto the spline stud coming off of the linkage, 2 15mm nuts, followed by the beauty covers if you still have those, and then that way you can move on. Now that we have the cowl secured, we can do the last few bits of the inlet kit. We're going to swap out the old small elbow with this longer piece that feeds to the new hard pipe going to the airbox. DO88 is kind enough to supply some clamps with those as well, so you don't have to worry about reusing any old clamps. Small flathead screwdriver will do the trick, and we can feed that vacuum line over to the inlet pipe. Next, we're going to work on the actual beauty cover, whether you have the plastic finish or carbon fiber finish. There is a great instruction kit included with all of these parts, by the way, but it's pretty straightforward. We're going to use our small spacer, and then we have a small, what I call a little fork. That's what's going to help key this cover onto the top of our cylinder head, as well as a couple rubber bushings that are going to help insulate everything. Once you get all four situated, you can go ahead and feed it over the top of the cylinder head, and you're going to kind of feed it on and slide it over to lock it into place. There's a couple rubber bushings that help take up any slack and vibration. Once you have those in place, you can feed in the hex bolts up top to snug it down. At this point, we can go ahead and button up the front of the car. We have our new bumper brace or crash bar that goes over the larger intercooler. This is a must for cars equipped with the adaptive cruise control. 2 15mm bolts hold that into place. Then we can take the foam piece, which is labeled up, feed that back onto the main crash bar. And then with that, these plastic winglets, you can opt to keep them or lose them depending on your preference and how you remove them or the condition of your vehicle. In our case, these ones were still in one piece, so we're going to go ahead and use them. Grab a second set of hands and just feed our bumper over in place. We're not going to push it on all the way just yet. We're going to have our helper hold it while we hook up any electrical connections or headlight washer lines before we clip it all the way in. Again, on the top part of the bumper underneath where the headlight sits, we have a couple tabs that key into the support there. Same with the tabs on the end by the wheel wells. We have those two little plastic tabs. Make sure those situate themselves once more. We have the 3 small expanding rivets at the bottom of the bumper, which go into the lower radiator support. If you remember, this car was missing one as it was broken, so we can go ahead and replace those as well. We can hook up our headlight washer line once more if your car is equipped with those before we install the fender liners. Again, the fender liners, we just peeled back 5 T25s on either side. All right, before we go ahead and reinstall the expanding rivets and the torque screws at the top of the bumper, we're going to go ahead and install our headlights. That way we have a little bit of give on the top half of the bumper to kind of squeeze them in. Go ahead and plug in your electrical connectors. Once the headlights are in position, you can take your plastic swords and just pop them back into place, clipping in the headlight to the whole radiator core support. Probably one of the best things, or one of the easiest headlights to remove on any car out there. So Volvo, good job on those. All right, with those, my good people, we can install the 2 Torx bolts once more, the 2 T25s, followed by the 7 expanding rivets that hold our bumper in place. At this point, that is going to conclude this DIY. Now, at this point, we have been testing the kit quite a bit, and it actually gave us 3 more miles per gallon on average with daily driving use. So kind of interesting. Obviously, the car is going to be breathing a whole lot better, way larger volume. Not only are we increasing horsepower, but just the way the engine breathes. So it makes sense. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you like this style of voiceover on a DIY, a little bit quicker for a longer job like this, let us know in the comments. If you don't like it, let us know as well. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.